What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Very Cold Lasagna, the podcast that houses a safe and open listening platform for casual, cold, and even the dumbest takes on the wide world of pro wrestling and sports, especially WWE, AEW, and the National Football League. I'm your host, DylanLasagna. Welcome to today's episode number 31. 31 episodes in, and it's been 6 months. And in case you missed it, we had a State of the Fridge. It's kind of like a play on the like a state of the franchise or whatever. But we had this State of the Fridge. In other words, kind of like an update of sorts of what's going on here behind the scenes here on Very Cold Lasagna. And, reflecting back on the first 6 months of the podcast, I want to take some time in a video to talk about like what's going on, looking back at the first 6 months, like what we've accomplished, even if it's very little. But I like even those very little things matter to me. And as you can see, if you're watching the video version on YouTube, the biggest change is the layout and the logo. We got a super fresh logo, a super fresh intro, and me liking. I hope you guys like it too. So, as I mentioned in the State of the Fridge, I tried to make this video layout, this podcast layout, much more simplistic than the previous one was. Because admittedly, the older one was very cluttered. You have a lot of things going on the screen, and I know a lot of people, when their first impression of a content creator in general is like, why is there so much stuff on the screen? Or, I don't know. I tried to make it more simplistic, and I think, personally, the final product, the final end result was a success. So, you got the logo on the top left-hand corner, where you can listen to the podcast on the bottom left, and the topic we're going to discuss today, obviously, when we get there, is in fills up the rest of the bottom of the screen. So we can have some much more open area for interaction between you and me. But anyway, that is pretty much what has been going on. You could see the logo changes all over Very Cold Lasagna on social media, on YouTube, on the podcast listening websites, what have you. This is kind of like a new chapter for Very Cold Lasagna. Obviously, the content is going to remain the same, but I like the logo. I really like the logo. This is kind of like the formal look that I'm personally going for Very Cold Lasagna. So we're still going to be the very casual, very highly opinionated, very chill show here on whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Anchor FM. But I wanted to get super fresh. I want to get this much more cleaner look going for this show. But yeah, that's pretty much how the State of the Fridge went. So in case you missed it, it's on the YouTube channel. I recommend checking it out. But I would recommend also checking out even more is everything else in relation to Dylan Lasagna, because we gotta shill ourselves here on the podcast. So anyway, make sure to check me out on YouTube, check out this podcast, turn on the notification bell, subscribe so you'll be notified of each and every podcast that comes out on YouTube, so you can see this beautiful face right here, as well as you can get videos about rants, news pieces that don't get talked about here on the podcast episodes, as well as some other things that I might have to discuss. If you want to listen to me on the road, or on the toilet or whatnot when you're, doing your business, you can listen to me on Apple Podcasts, Anchor FM, and Spotify. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram for all my shenanigans at Very Cold Lasagna. Now, before we get into today's topic, I want to go into my secondary topic first and talk about the week in wrestling. Obviously, SmackDown didn't happen yet because, well, we're not quite there yet. But there were some other things that happened in wrestling, obviously, with Monday Night Raw and AEW Dynamite, which had its first show back on the road with Road Rager. Their show with their special like back on the road show or whatever. So we start with Monday Night Raw. I'm obviously not gonna do like a like match by match, like this thing happened like in particular kind of thing. So just like last week, we're gonna just go like small snippets of the show. So apparently they had 2 weeks left before Money in the Bank, the first pay-per-view with fans. So that being said, let's take a look at what we got here. So in the main event, the New Day beat Bobby Lashley and MVP, and it's kind of an interesting decision, considering Bobby Lashley needs to look strong as hell for his big match at SummerSlam, but I don't know why they're making Kofi Kingston try to like be strong. I don't know. So New Day beat Bobby Lashley and MVP, and then to open the show, Miz hosted Miz TV with all the Money in the Bank competitors, and apparently Matt Riddle was high as fuck. No, literally, he was on the ladder, and everyone brawled with each other, and yeah, that was pretty much it. John Morrison faced off against Ricochet in a rematch from last week, and this time Morrison beat Ricochet by countout, and I imagine a lot of people cared about that match. Yeah, I'm sure they did. I'm sure like less than 1.4 million people. Oh, sorry, I spoiled what I was gonna say next. I'm sure a lot of people cared about that match. So Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler, Piper Niven, aka Dud Drop, and Eva Marie beat Nikki Cross, Asuka, Naomi, and Alexa Bliss when Nia Jax hit Nikki Cross with the Samoan drop, and yeah, no one cares. Mustafa Ali defeated Mansoor with a fruit roll-up. Nobody cares. Drew McIntyre beat Jinder Mahal by disqualification after interference from Mahal's new buddies, and Mahal, Veer, and Shanky beat down Drew McIntyre and stole McIntyre's sword. So I guess this is kind of planting the seeds for a SummerSlam match. I mean, kind of I don't know. It's kind of a step down for McIntyre, but I mean, I guess it's something to get him away from the WWE title after Money in the Bank. So sure, whatever. So Lucha House Party beat Mason T-Bar. Nobody cares. Matt Riddle defeated AJ Styles with another fruit roll-up. So yeah. Charlotte Flair and Rhea Ripley beat each other up with crutches, and this was supposed to be like the segment where Charlotte was having like a medical update from last week with like a beatdown of sorts, and then Rhea Ripley came out with their own injury in air quotes, and it was like a setup to like try to convince fans that Charlotte's faking it or whatnot, but in the end of the day nobody cared. And last but not least, Jackson Riker and R-Truth beat Cedric Alexander and Elias, and yeah, I imagine nobody cared about that either. So that was Raw, and yeah, just looking at the results, I can see why I got the lowest rating ever again. Like, I mean, at least there's not a lot of rematches as before, I guess, like in the previous months, but goddamn, there is like no star power. There is no like key person that sells this show, like that makes you want to watch on Monday nights. It's terrible. It is it's god awful, but not as god awful as AEW. At least it's like AEW, like Raw is worse, but like AEW is just flips and kicks, man. So we get to Road Rager, AEW Dynamite on Wednesday. So we had Cody Rhodes open the show with QT Marshall in the South Beach strap-on match. And like midway through, QT Marshall was busted open, and yeah, that thing happened. And Cody Rhodes won the match. Of course he did. So yeah, that was your opening match. Shawn Spears cut a promo backstage, and that was pretty much it. And he's asking, and everyone's asking why, but Sammy's ego is his greatest weakness. So yeah, that's pretty much all there was that. So we have an in-ring segment with Tony Schiavone. He's going to interview Kenny Omega, and instead Don Callis tells Tony to go away, and pretty much he's just giving a promo of like Kenny Omega's accomplishments. But here comes Evil Uno and the Dork Order. I'm just like they're still there. Like, come on, man. Like, why are they still there? So, like a few minutes after, like they brawl with like the Good Brothers and the Dork Order brawl with each other. Hangman Adam Page like saves the day. And I guess this is like a tease for their match at All Out. Hopefully they get to that point with All Out. They don't do a match beforehand. So there's that. So then we have a sit down interview with Ethan Page and Darby Allin for next week's coffin match. So yeah, there's that. Then we get the next match of the night between the Inner Circle, Jake Hager or Santana and Ortiz going up against the Pinnacles, Cash Wheeler, Dax Hardwood, aka the Revival, and Wardlow. The Pinnacle won when Wardlow pinned Jack Swagger with a lateral press. Okay, sure. So next week we're going to have Jon Moxley defending his IWGP US title against Carl Anderson. Yeah, that's certainly gonna bring in the ratings, pal. So another in-ring segment. So at least this week, like, even though AEW is mostly kicks and flips, I mean, at least there's a lot more segments than like actual flips and kicks. So that's good, I guess. So this segment was pretty much about a kind of like a rehash of the like that one time where MJF was trying to get through Cody, like to go like, how do I say it? He's trying to make Jericho go through these stipulations again. So he pretty much has to face each and every member of the Inner Circle before he can get a match with MJF. So yeah. And apparently during the segment, a fan ran into the ring, and like, yeah, this even in AEW events, like, this is happening. Like, guys, come on now. I thought AEW was, like, you know, more behaved than WWE fans, you know, but apparently not. Like, the first road live event happens and this shit happens. Like, wow. So next up, we get Dr. Britt Baker in a pre-recorded interview with Tony Schiavone. Apparently this was like kind of making the rounds. She kind of made a dig towards WWE's relationship to Saudi Arabia, and well, I'm pretty much against like these WWE jabs by AEW at this point because they're so repetitive. I mean, this one actually solidified because, yeah, WWE should not be doing business with Saudi Arabia. So I guess this one by Britt Baker, yeah. I mean, I'll allow it. I'll let it slide. Whatever. Next up, we had Andrade's big debut. Yeah, he's the ratings mover, guys. He's gonna change the landscape of pro wrestling. He's gonna beat WWE. Andrade makes his debut against Matt Sydal. Nobody cares. But I bet the hardcore wrestling fans were jizzing their pants over Andrade. But yeah, that's pretty much that. So Arn Anderson later comes out. He was being interviewed by Tony Schiavone, but the lights go black, and guess who makes his debut? Guess who makes his big debut in AEW? Aleister Black. Yeah, remember Aleister Buttcrack? Back when he was released, what was that, a month ago? Yeah, he somehow was able to appear in AEW 30 months after it was supposedly believed that he couldn't appear until, like, in any other company until September or October. But no, actually, like, apparently what was happening is that WWE forgot to update his, like, non-compete to 90 days. So that's kind of a big oof on WWE. So anyway, Aleister Black, who's now going by the name Malachi Black, it's like a downgrade to his WWE name. Why could they just call him Tommy Black? Like, why couldn't they go with that? What who decided on that name? Was it AEW? Was it Tommy End? Like, come on. That is a really dumb name. So he lays out Arn Anderson and Cody Rhodes with the Black Mass, and yeah, I mean, for all the people that love Aleister Black, sure, your wet dream has come true. He's all elite now, whatever. So then we had Orange Cassidy and Chris Statlander going up against the Blade and the Bunny. I mean, it was nothing special. I mean, Chris Statlander's all right, and so is the Bunny, but they get the win when Chris Statlander hits the Big Bang Theory on the Bunny. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So some other bullshit happened that I don't care about. Then in the main event, the Cucks of Suck retained their AEW World Tag Team titles against Eddie Kingston and Penta El Zero M in a street fight. So yeah, that was AEW Dynamite Road Rager. The first of, I think it was like four. The first of four events on their Back on the Road tour. So that was AEW's and Monday Night Raw, like some highlights from this past week. And AEW's rating was 840 something, 870 or whatever. So it's just kind of a sad state of how the wrestling ratings are nowadays. It's like, if you try to present this shit to someone, they're probably going to question you. Like, why do you watch this shit? It's like I don't want to watch, like, that person you're trying to present this to is like, yeah, I don't want to watch this. And you know what? I can't blame that person. Honestly, if I showed this to someone that doesn't watch pro wrestling at all, and I showed them, let's say, Aleister Black appearing in AEW, I was like, who the fuck is this? I can't blame them. I could not blame them at all. Because nobody cares. No one cares about Aleister Black. No one cares about Kenny Omega. Nobody cares about Cody Rhodes. Nobody cares about Rhea Ripley or Charlotte or a lot of wrestlers today. I mean, some people care about Roman Reigns. I mean, for as much as I like Roman Reigns, it's just, wrestling is so bad. Wrestling is so bad nowadays. But that's your Raw highlights. That's pretty much this week in wrestling. And I just want good wrestling, man. I just want good wrestling with storytelling, characters, and all that stuff. Like, can we just have a good balance of it, please? Can we just have a good balance of that? Now, let's get into today's topic. The end of the COVID era. The end of the COVID era in pro wrestling. It's near, but it's not fully complete. Yeah, sure. AEW is back on the road. It already had a full capacity of fans in attendance at Daly's Place. And again, it's already back on the road in Miami with fans, but it's not fully complete yet. Because as I talked about, I think it was a couple episodes or in a couple of like YouTube videos before, WWE is not yet back on the road. They are not back on the road until next week with SmackDown in Houston, I believe, where the Houston Rockets play. So until they're back on the road, yeah, this COVID era is not over yet. So that's why I say this topic, this episode, it's the end of the COVID era pro wrestling is almost near. It's almost over. But the reason why I want to talk about the end of wrestling's COVID period is, just kind of like go back. I just wanted to like look back and look at wrestling's best and worst moments, both in WWE and AEW in general, because there were a lot of things that happened. And sure, the things that I mentioned in this video are like not going to be the ones that like you may personally recall, or like X person or Y person's going to recall. These are just my personal moments that stood out to me. That stood out, and like I still fondly remember. And to be honest with you, like if you want my personal opinion on the COVID era of wrestling, it was mostly terrible. It was mostly crappy, and I know a lot of people feel the same way, but this was honestly the worst time to be a wrestling fan. And if anyone says otherwise, they're crazy. They are crazy telling you that. Especially like I understand. It's just, I know it's my opinion, but the people that are watching AEW, not saying this is the greatest time to be a wrestling fan ever. Wrestling is back because of AEW. Like, do you not know what made wrestling so relevant back in the early 2000s, or the Attitude Era, or even in the golden era of wrestling? Larger than life wrestlers that looked like wrestlers, that acted like wrestlers, that had characters, that told great stories, that were marketable around the world. The Hogans, the Rocks, the Austins, the Cenas. Heck, even the mid-card wrestlers like Mysterio. Who else was there? Eddie Guerrero. All those guys, they were a marketable presence back in the heyday. Where do we see those now? I think the biggest problem with this pandemic is that it exposed the lack of stars, the lack of marketable and ratings moving stars in the COVID pandemic. Not just in the COVID pandemic, but in general in pro wrestling. And hence why you don't see Monday Night Raw or Friday Night SmackDown getting any ratings bump, like significant ratings bump, or AEW when there's 2 years in its lifespan, going beyond 1 million viewers, or even getting to that 1.5 million viewership. You're not seeing a substantial push from either of them, because nobody cares about wrestling. Not the casual viewer doesn't care about a Kenny Omega. They don't care about the cucks of sucks, flips and kicks. They don't care about Ricochet. They don't care about Aleister Black. And for the people that it's like nobody cares about the casuals, then why do the ratings continue to drop? Sure, you could blame the WWE or anyone else all you want. You can make all the excuses that, oh, the NBA Finals was on. Oh, my mom was taking a big ass shit in the toilet. You could blame all these things all you want, but at the end of the day, the COVID era exemplified that there are better things to do than to see a glorified circus act. That's pretty much all that wrestling has become. It's become a circus act in pretty much this day and age. So I think that's the biggest worst thing to come out of this out of the COVID-19 pandemic for wrestling. So that's that. That's the first thing. There are a lot of things, obviously, and we're gonna go into that right now. So obviously, the first thing, besides the one I just mentioned, was the pandemic. Obviously, in March of 2020, forcing WWE and AEW to move to its respective, like, I don't know, I guess you could say a base of sorts. Like, the WWE had to move to the Performance Center, and AEW had to move to Daly's place. And then I think for like a brief period, they were in like some warehouse of sorts doing like Dynamite tapings for like a month or two before they went back to Daly's place before Double or Nothing 2020. And man, those were strange times. Like, those were really strange times. And like, I'm like, this is kind of like a continuation of like the first two, like of the next two things. But I just remember when WWE had the first show at the PC, like shortly before the United States went into like this big state of emergency over COVID. Like they were having fans. Like, it was a packed performance center with fans on this NXT show. I think AEW also had fans in like a full arena, but literally the next day, the US goes into a state of emergency. Everyone's freaking out because of COVID. And literally the day after, SmackDown as the empty performance center show, the first one. And that's pretty much what happened for the next 2 months. And it's honestly very surprising that both Vince McMahon and Tony Khan, like at the time, like as the weeks went on, I was genuinely very surprised that they were allowed to keep going with taping their shows in Florida. But then again, as we soon realized, yeah, Florida, Ron DeSantis, let them keep going. And that was one of the other bad things about the pandemic. But eventually, over time, I got over it. Because Ron DeSantis deemed pro wrestling as an essential business. And I still think that is not an essential business. Like, that decision remains one of the stupidest ones by Ron DeSantis. But then again, it's Florida. Like, they're still pretty stupid. I mean, I guess their thinking was because they need to be entertained. I mean, sure, you could entertain us with, showing clips of some episodes from the past on WWE, but no, we had to go, risk people's lives at a time where nobody knew, there was no vaccine back then. There was no vaccine at the very early onset of the coronavirus pandemic. And nobody knew how to get it under control. Hospitalization rates were creeping up and people were dying. Yes, again, not a big time rate, but people were testing positive for this thing. So, yeah, that was pretty bad. That was pretty, like it was pretty stupid of them. It was pretty stupid of DeSantis to let them keep going. Like, and it would have been a good opportunity for the wrestlers to heal up, rest up, and finally have an off season of sorts. But yeah, very bad decision by DeSantis right there. And then a couple of wrestlers passed away in the year 2020. It was pretty sad, to be honest with you. Shad Gaspard, formerly of Crime Time, his partner with JTG, he passed away in 2020. He was trying to save his son, who swam too far at a beach, and he got caught in a ferocious tidal wave, and they couldn't find him. And once they did find him, he was gone. That still remains a sad passing. Apparently, they also, from the accounts that people were putting of Shad Gaspard, he was a very, very, very good father, very good man. Still, even to this day, prayers up for his family, and his son. And this other passing, I'm not too familiar with, but it was still pretty big back then. Was this Japanese wrestler by the name of Hana Kimura. She passed away at a very young age, 22, or somewhere in her early 20s, and it's happened because she was getting a lot of backlash over appearing on a Japanese show, a Japanese reality show, and she was getting a lot of internet backlash from everywhere on the internet, and she took her own life over that. She committed suicide over that, and it it was a bad situation surrounding her death, and it got exploited real bad. Especially with the situation regarding Alexa Bliss, like this like bullying situation between this drama between Alexa Bliss and another podcaster by the name of JD from New York. That escalated real bad in May of 2020. I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail, but yeah, I would recommend looking it up. Because it was pretty much all it started was by a burner account that posted this out of context clip where JD was pretty much making like this comparison of Alexa Bliss and, you know, being in bed. That pretty much got out of control from there on out. And all I can say about that is neither side came out as a winner. No one came out as a winner on that. And still, it was just a very bad situation from that. And then at the end of the year, this one came as a real surprise. Brody Lee, aka Luke Harper, passed away in December 2020. He was relatively young. I think he was mid 30s, early 40s, but still pretty young. So sudden that he passed away. AEW did this really good tribute show for him at the end of the year. They did this good tribute with his son, but just sad that a lot of pro wrestling figures passed away last year. And moving on from this really sad portion, like I mentioned before, like WWE and AEW failed to develop any like ratings moving stars like in a positive manner. Like, it just goes to show that wrestling will never be like it was back in the Attitude Era or the Ruthless Aggression Era. Like, there will never be a point of that time again. Like, there will never be a point where wrestling was as popular as it once was. Like, you could make the argument that wrestling is back to where it was. Like, AEW's getting promoted on Inside the NBA with Ernie, Kenny, Charles, and Shaq, and WWE is getting all this money with Peacock and all these other companies. But to be honest with you, it's like, it's not growing. It is not growing at all. It's like who if, again, like I mentioned before, who's gonna, if I show Ricochet to someone, are they really gonna care? Are they really gonna like him? No. So that was pretty much what happened generally in pro wrestling. Like, pretty much everything that went wrong during the pandemic era of pro wrestling. Now, let's talk about specifically WWE. Like, there were a lot of bad things, honestly, that happened in WWE, but there were several things that pretty much stood out to me when it came to WWE during the COVID pandemic. And the biggest failure that stood out to me, that was not just the ratings, but the failed stable known as Retribution. Like, my God, like, I'm so very surprised that WWE continued this stable for as long as it did. I think it was, how long was it? I think it was like 6 months. They gave it 6 or 7 months until they broke the stable up. That's how long they kept going with it. They started back in June or July or something, and they lasted until I think January or February, like, of this year. Like, damn, like, nobody cared about these guys. Like, why? I had several questions, like, when they started appearing in person. Like, why did they only go after jobbers? Why did they not go after the main event players like Randy Orton, Drew McIntyre? They went after Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt on the Thunderdome, but they got their ass whooped. They got their ass whooped by them. And I'm just wondering, like, did they ever mention what they were getting Retribution for? It was like why they were raining havoc on WWE? Like, did anyone care? And my biggest question was, why did they get contracts in storyline? Of course, why did they get WWE contracts when they literally destroyed the Performance Center? Why? I don't get it. I did not get that part. So once they started getting rid of the bank robbers masks, and they were getting Bane masks, from The Dark Knight Rises, a lot of people started to know who they were. Mostly the hardcore fans, because obviously casuals don't know who they were. Yeah, it was so damn obvious who these people were. Most notably, Mia Yim from NXT. And then later on, they were given Mustafa Ali, the crying SJW on Twitter. He eventually joined the group and was the ringleader. And yeah, that failed too. So, man, who thought that a badly booked and also a talentless group of individuals would fail like immediately? Literally, they were badly booked by WWE, but they were also bad at their jobs themselves. They sucked. They really, really sucked. They couldn't even like do anything. Like they couldn't do anything. They couldn't turn crap into something like bearable to watch. So they overall failed from the start. They just overall failed. And honestly, I'm glad that they're off TV. I'm overall glad they don't have these stupid Bane masks. They don't have the stupid Retribution thing going on anymore. I'm so glad it's gone. And obviously, I mentioned before the empty performance center, like first 2 months, because honestly, it sounded like porn. It sounded like the P hub, the porn hub. Yeah, like honestly, it was very hard to endure watching WWE during the pandemic. But especially during the first 2 months, like I swear to God, I could not watch like a full episode of Raw or SmackDown during this pandemic, because not only did the show like suffer from like bad writing or like questionable booking, but there's just no energy in this show without fans. And honestly, for as bad as the writing is and all that, like one of the key things in a wrestling show is fans. And without it, yeah, you cannot sit through a wrestling show. And same goes for AEW. Especially with AEW, like there are a lot of hardcore wrestling fans that like to bring the energy and stuff. But it just felt awkward. It was like you're watching a basketball practice at training camp or something. Or, NFL training camp or something. I say the biggest example of pro wrestling, whether it's in WWE or AEW, or it's at the Performance Center or an empty-ass Daly's Palace, has to be at WrestleMania 36 with Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte Flair, where they were just like, every time they got hit with a finisher or a signature move, either Rhea Ripley or Charlotte would like moan like so loud that I was just questioning myself. Why are you doing it? Why do you have to be so loud? Why do you have to like this? Like this is not. You know what? At this point, it's like I swear. Good. I was like literally watching this, and I made the mistake of not having my headphones on, and like good thing my door was shut. Otherwise, like someone would get him walking in here and like, what the fuck are you watching, sir? Like, this is not, this is not the P porn word. Like, God damn it. And another bad thing that happened in WWE was the downfall of The Fiend, Bray Wyatt. Like, obviously, it started to happen with, that match with Seth Rollins at Hell in a Cell, but it was further escalated with, Bray Wyatt getting his ass whooped for no goddamn reason against Goldberg at Super Showdown, stupid shit down, back before the pandemic hit. But what made things even sketchier was down the line, was when he was in this feud with Braun Strowman, and then he gets his ass whooped by Roman Reigns. I mean, sure, it's the Tribal Chief, so you can't do anything about it. But then, he has a somewhat like a kind of like saving grace with Alexa Bliss, who turns like kind of like this Harley Quinn-esque character. But then even the WWE fucks that up too. They have him lose to Randy Orton at TLC, set him on fire, and then when he comes back, he loses to Randy Orton again. Only this time, Alexa Bliss like goes full on demented with like the venom going down her face, and yeah, that's pretty much how it went. So yeah, that was pretty much all that is to that. And Alexa Bliss, it's like, what is going on with her character? What is going, like, what is she doing? Like, I don't know what to make of it. It's like, she's had potential. She had potential to be like the Fiend's like right hand, woman. But instead, it's like she's not doing anything on Raw anymore. She's like, oh, she's just there with like being the replacement for Bray Wyatt. That's it. Like, there's nothing cool. Like, and now she has this doll, Lily. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? And then we had WWE's shit booking with the women's division during Bayley and Sasha Banks' reign of terror. These two did nothing to bring in the ratings up. They brought the ratings down, and their opponents didn't benefit from either Bayley or Sasha Banks. Like, every time Bayley and Sasha Banks were on TV, they would cut these very, very obviously scripted promos, and obviously nobody cared. At least with Bayley, like during the early portions of the Thunderdome when she was feuding with Sasha, at least she tried. Sasha Banks didn't try at all. She was like, you're a bitch. I hate you. That's Sasha Banks, and yet people still praise her to death because she has good technical work rate. So, also during this reign of terror, Asuka, who was the Raw Women's Champion because, repetitive stale Becky Lynch, obviously now has a kid, so good for her. She had to leave due to the pregnancy. But the problem was Asuka had no one to face besides Bayley or Sasha Banks because, again, WWE didn't beef up the women's division in a time it desperately needed. Like, even if they had to call up Rhea Ripley earlier than before, or Dakota Kai even before, like, they should have done it. They should have gave Asuka some competition. No, let's put her in match after match with Bayley and Sasha Banks on the opposite brand, making the brand split even more pointless. Like, for as big of an advocate as I am with the brand split, let's just end it. Because clearly they don't care. Like, even if it means less opportunities for other people, like, they just don't care. I think one of the other bigger things, and I complained about this one a lot, is WWE ruining the main event of WrestleMania 37. The big match that could have been so well, that could have done so well for WrestleMania. Edge versus Roman Reigns. But instead, they inserted that fucker, Daniel Bryan, that vegan fucker, Daniel Bryan, into the Edge versus Roman Reigns story when WWE didn't put any effort to create a story, any compelling promos into the Edge versus Roman Reigns one-on-one story beforehand, and now they're just doing it for Money in the Bank, a throwaway pay-per-view? Like, why? Why are we doing this? And it doesn't help the fact that nothing came out of it afterwards. Nothing came out of that triple threat aside from, Roman Reigns stacking Daniel Bryan and Edge on top of each other for, a very good visual, I guess. But Edge went on hiatus before coming back. Daniel Bryan obviously hasn't been around since, and apparently he's no longer under contract with WWE, so made the match even more pointless. Like, what? I still can't believe WWE went through with that. I still can't believe they went through with that. So, yeah. Obviously, I mentioned before, like WWE decreasing in quality on Raw and SmackDown, especially on Raw with the constant rematches. But I mentioned that so many times that not a lot needs to be said. So for as bad as WWE has been, especially during this time period, AEW has had its terrible moments too. It really has had its terrible moments. And some of its terrible moments include Matt Hardy landing head first on the back of his head on concrete at All Out 2020 during a Falls Count Anywhere match with Sammy Guevara. Like, I rewatched that moment in preparation for this, and I still wonder why Aubrey Edwards was just standing there, and then, like, when she was trying to make a judgment, she let the match continue. Like, why? You clearly saw Matt Hardy. He couldn't get up. He was in no condition to continue. But, yes, I'm talking about an event that happened almost a year ago. But, like, why did AEW think this was a good idea to let this match go? Matt clearly couldn't move. He was clearly concussed. He was barely able to finish that match. They should have stopped it. They should have stopped it here and there. It just further indicated the point that they don't care about the health of their employees. They don't. Another bad thing that happened for AEW during this period, the various bad endings to what's supposed to be big matches for them, especially this year. A lot of it happened this year with the barbed wire death match between Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley. You all remember the Morning Glory sparklers from Phantom Fireworks and TNT Fireworks. Oh, I guess Kenny Omega brought some in from those companies and, decided to sprinkle it into the ring. And it's like, haha, got you. Like, I set up all these Morning Glories just for the sake of all your stupid asses. So that was a really stupid ending. And this is not as stupid as the Revolution ending, but I think it's how it was how it was presented. And that was Chris Jericho crashing through the stage at the end of the Blood and Guts show 2 months ago on Dynamite. The problem with this spot was not how Jericho sold it, but the way the cameras caught it. They caught in 4K. I keep using that phrase, but they caught Jericho literally laying down on a crash pad. Now, sure, obviously, I don't want him to land on fucking concrete like Matt Hardy did because I don't want him to die. But the camera should have done a better job of, concealing that, hiding the fact that Jericho landed on a crash pad. They should have done better. And AEW, obviously being the rookies that they are, the stupid assholes they are, they didn't. They did not. So then we had Kenny Omega's still ongoing reign of terror as AEW World Champion. This asshole is doing nothing memorable but having a Morning Glory sparkler match at Revolution, fighting two jobbers at Double or Nothing in the second to last match of a major pay-per-view, and fighting a dude that almost nobody cares about on the most latest edition of Dynamite. This is your world champion. And all he's doing is sinking TNA's ratings further down the toilet. That's all he's doing. Apparently, TNA, apparently still relevant, got 69K viewers. That's their lowest viewership ever. And they deserve it because they suck. Like, back in the day, at least they had a million with Hogan, Bischoff, Styles, Sting, Kevin Nash, Samoa Joe, Jeff Hardy, Rob Van Dam, Abyss. Who do you have in TNA now? It's just AEW light. It literally is AEW light. So Kenny Omega is doing nothing to make AEW so revolutionary. It's not. Speaking of not revolutionary, let's talk about the Cucks of Suck. They're pretty much doing the same bullshit that they've been doing for the last like 2 years, if you're counting AEW, and the last, well, let's say 10 years. 10 fucking years. All these flips, kicks, no characters, no compelling stories, nothing interesting about the Cucks that Suck. I can rant on the Cucks that Suck all I want, but there are a lot of things that we have to talk about for the rest of this episode. Hikaru Shida, her reign of terror as a women's champion, but not as significantly bad as Kenny Omega and the Cucks that Suck. It's just that she did nothing. She didn't doing anything as AEW Women's Champion. Seriously, she held that title for over a year, and she defended it much less than when Brock Lesnar held the Universal Championship for over 500 days. Like, can you name me one time besides the time where she lost the title to Britt Baker at Double or Nothing, and obviously the time where she won the title at the previous Double or Nothing against Nyla Rose? In between those times, when did she defend the title? All I remember from Hikaru Shida's women's title reign is her sitting at ringside. You know, that's all she was doing. She was clapping her ass on each and every show on Dynamite for a good chunk of her reign. That's all she was doing. That's all. Like, I don't know. It's not. I don't know if it's a fault to her own, but I think it's a fault to Kenny Omega not knowing how to run a women's division. Like, I don't get it. What's the problem here? So then we had the Big Show and Mark Henry being signed to AEW, but they're commentators for Elevation and Rampage, respectively. And I'm just like, the Big Show can still wrestle. The Big Show, like, you know, this 7 foot, 400 pound, well, giant is still able to wrestle, and yet Tony Khan is doing a big disservice to a legend in the industry. I know, like, I kind of bashed on him in the past, but admittedly, he's pretty good at what he does. But yet, this dude, Tony Khan, relegates him to a commentary role because, for whatever reason. I don't get him. And I don't know about Mark Henry. Like, I don't know if he's fully retired. Maybe he is actually legit want to be a commentator. I don't know. But the last worst thing about AEW during the pandemic was this legendary signing. This legendary signing that they were hyping up to be. Everyone thought it was going to be Brock Lesnar. Everyone thought it was going to be CM Punk. But no, it's Christian. It was Christian. That was the big reveal at AEW Revolution. And it didn't help, you know. It was like, well, you know, the Big Show revealing this big signing. And two WWE XW guys were in that same segment. And Christian comes out, you know, outwork everyone. It's just weird. It's very weird that Christian was set up as this legendary name, and look what he's doing now. He's not really doing anything in AEW. They set him up to fail. They really did. But that was the worst of pro wrestling in the pandemic era. At least some of the things that I thought were bad. But obviously, there was a lot of bad in pro wrestling, but I want to talk about some good things. There were some good things that happened in both WWE and AEW, and just in general with wrestling. And I want to first talk about the fans. They're making their eventual return to AEW events. They already have with Revolution. They started in a limited capacity, and then a full capacity at Double Nothing, and now they're back to live touring with their Road Rager event this past month. So for as much as I shit on the AEW product, at least it's, I don't know, bearable to watch now with the fans back in attendance. Well, just don't do the shit that one fan did by, you know, like jumping the fence and trying to, I don't know, whatever they're trying to go after Chris Jericho or MJF. Just don't be that stupid fan, you know? But at least these fans are always there, regardless of how bad or good the show is. They bring in the energy. They bring in the energy to these shows. And then the Thunderdome, at least for a while, it was good. It was good. I actually experimented with the Thunderdome in its first heyday. But it was, it was all right. But I mean, at least it was better than the fake ass Performance Center stand-ins and the empty ass Performance Center. But then that was obviously before WWE started to go overboard with the crowd effects, like it was like 2K whatever. And then I don't like to harp on you know, people losing their jobs, but WWE releasing a lot these wrestlers, whether it was the spring cleaning in 2020 or the spring cleaning in 2021 parts 1, 2, and 3, because to be honest with you, they were all jobbers. The people that were cut were jobbers. Like, they didn't do anything memorable. They weren't moving the ratings. They weren't moving merchandise. Like, what casual would care about the moronics? You know, moronic, Peyton Royce and Billy Kay, or Aleister Black. Now, obviously he's in AEW, but who cared about him? Tyler Breeze and Fandango, or Braun Strowman. Well, Braun Strowman still remains a surprising release for me, because they just pushed this guy to the moon as Universal Champion, and was just in a WWE title match before he got released. But that's besides the point. The point is, they were all jobbers. They weren't going to move the ratings. They weren't going to make a positive impact on the show. So, I guess that, like, WWE cutting the filler out was a good thing for them. And, you know, I'm not a big advocate for people for losing their jobs. I hope they find work somewhere else. But, like, WWE needs to get rid of the filler and get the good filler that knows how to tell a good story and knows how to be a good character. And even if you don't have a good character, at least have know how to cut a good promo and have good charisma, both physically and verbally. Now for the good things about WWE. The cinematic matches at WrestleMania 36. Like, the main event of WrestleMania 36 Night 1 was a Boneyard match between AJ Styles and The Undertaker. This was a very well-produced match, and honestly, I throughout that match, I always tended to forget that this was like you know, pre-filmed beforehand. Like, I sometimes thought that this was live, like going on in the woods. But this was very well produced. There wasn't too many like camera cuts. Like, they did all these crazy spots. Undertaker chokeslamming AJ Styles off the roof of the house, and then chokeslamming him into the grave. And, you know, that last visual of Undertaker and the symbol in the background, you know, riding off on his motorcycle into the darkness, not the sunset. Obviously, it's the Undertaker. But it was a good send-off to the Undertaker. It was a very good send-off. It was very well produced. And the Firefly Funhouse match between Bray Wyatt and John Cena, man, that was like that. It was good. That was just a crazy acid trip. That's the best way I could describe that. They were doing I guess the best way to describe it was like John Cena's journey to the past, like reliving the past. Like, he's reliving his debut his Thugonomics gimmick. He was even part of the NWO, and you know that now famous Vince McMahon meme of "that's such good shit." And obviously, you got the Fiend at the end, getting his revenge on Cena. But yeah, those cinematic matches were pretty good. Set the tone for some more cinematic matches throughout the year, whether it was from WWE or AEW. It set the tone. Then you had the summer of Randy Orton in 2020. He actually cut some pretty good promos. He actually tried last summer, whether it was against Edge, whether it was against Drew McIntyre, and you know, going back to being the Legend Killer, punting Ric Flair, The Big Show, Christian. So, and that was on his way to winning another WWE Championship against Drew McIntyre. Now, granted, I think Randy Orton should have held the WWE Championship a little longer, or either that, or not lose, or not have Drew McIntyre drop the WWE title at all. But nonetheless, Randy Orton had a pretty good renaissance in 2020, in that summer. But the biggest good thing in WWE had to be Roman Reigns turning babyface and becoming the tribal chief, man. He went full on like hero mode and became the head of the table. Like, if you don't think Roman Reigns is a good wrestler all around with a good story, a good character, I don't know what to tell you, man. He's like this mafia leader. It's like, you better perform your job or else there will be consequences. This dude has significantly improved. Like, in contrast to his heel days back in 2015 to 19, this dude sucked. This dude went from cutting promos about suffering succotash to forgetting his lines against John Cena to now he's cutting all these good promos about how he had to provide for his family, especially at a time where he really needed to, and why he left shortly before WrestleMania 36, and that beatdown on Jay at Night of Champions in Hell in a Cell in that I Quit match. Some of the best work Roman Reigns has done, and he still continues to put on good work even if there's no quality competition for him. Then we had Bobby Lashley's rise to WWE champion, and sure, he had some speed bumps along the way, but he finally got there. He beat the Jizz. Shortly before WrestleMania, like a month before WrestleMania, to become WWE champion. I thought Bobby Lashley's crowning moment should have been at WrestleMania against Drew McIntyre, but I mean, he's still WWE champion, and sure, he could use better booking now, but like, it's a culmination of 16 years, like, of working his way back up and going through a lot of bullshit on the writing and booking side of things, but he managed to pull through. He managed to earn a WWE title reign in the year of 2021. Oh, and I forgot to mention this. In the worst things that happened in the pandemic era of pro wrestling, The Miz winning the WWE Championship. The Jizz. This stupid asshole. Like winning the WWE title. Like, initially, I'm not as mad as I was before, obviously. That happened so long ago. But at the time, I was like, why did The Miz have to cash in? Like, were they so eager to take the Money in the Bank contract off? Or, like, shouldn't, like, why didn't they do an unsuccessful cash in? Like, this jobber was, like, didn't need to beat Drew McIntyre for the WWE title at all. But yeah, that happened. Two more things that I liked about WWE during this pandemic, and that was the former punter of the Indianapolis Colts, Pat McAfee. He made his wrestling debut at NXT TakeOver, I think it was TakeOver 30 back in August. It's almost 1 year. So he made his debut. Everyone thought he was going to do pretty poorly. He was going to suck. But he exceeded all expectations. Now, granted, he he had prior wrestling training before. He had wrestling training in, I think it was like 2015, and he was at an NXT live event, I think 3 years later. But besides the point, he was so good. He knew in-ring psychology. He knew how to play up his heel gimmick of doing it for the brand, shit talking Adam Cole, gay, and he pulled off this clean ass swanton bomb at the very beginning of the match, and he did this backflip off the top rope where Adam Cole tried to push him. He was so good, and he had a good sequel at War Games. Now, granted, I didn't see his sequel at War Games, but from the highlights, he looks pretty good in a hardcore setting. And well, he got rewarded with it with a commentator role for SmackDown, and I'd like to see Pat McAfee wrestle again at some point, but we'll see. And last but not least, Edge winning the Royal Rumble in last January. Obviously, we know what happened after that, but for what it was, still a good moment for Edge. Come back last year, when returning from retirement in the Royal Rumble, and then a year later winning the Royal Rumble at 1. So that was pretty good stuff there. So now, for as much as I talk crap about AEW and how bad they are, there were some good things that came out of AEW. There were some good things that came out of them, like the Stadium Stampede. Like, I know some people didn't like the Stadium Stampede because, this is too goofy. This is not pro wrestling. This is not the, the long matches that we crave so much. And you know what? It doesn't have to be. It did not have to be, because this is what wrestling needs a balance of. You can have your long matches, but you need the entertainment aspect of it too. And these 2 Stadium Stampede matches that we got at both Double or Nothings in the last 2 years, they were good. They were good. Now, I preferred the first one that they did back in 2020 between the Elite and the Inner Circle when they were heels, because there were just so many moments that made me laugh. Like, I guess you could say there's a drastic shift in terms of tone between the 2 matches. Like, the first match was this is for laughs, and the other match is like, this feels like a blood feud. But I preferred the first match because it just made me laugh so much. Like, Jericho giving the Jaguars mascot the Judas effect, Matt Hardy and Santana Ortiz fighting in the Jaguars pool, Guevara running away like always from Kenny Omega and Matt Hardy on a golf cart. It was like them fighting all over the stadium was really fun. It was really funny. And then like they managed to do it again the next year, and this felt like a much more serious fight between the Inner Circle and the Pinnacle, but it still had good moments. It really still had good moments. While it was still funny, but obviously not as funny as last year because you were trying to present this as a blood feud, but it still had its good moments. And you even had a cameo from the Jaguars head coach, Urban Meyer. So, I liked it. I personally liked these Stampede matches. Then you had the Jericho and MJF alliance in the Inner Circle before MJF formed the Pinnacle. And I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I thought it was a slow and decent payoff. I was just kind of disappointed that MJF decided to form a group of jobbers. But that's besides the point. Then we had, I think this was honestly the best thing that happened in the COVID era of AEW. I think, Britt Baker, her year of reinventing herself. Like, prior to this, she was just this happy-go-lucky, bubbly babyface that, she was known as the dentist, the DMD, but nobody really knew who, like, Britt Baker was. Like, why was she there? Like, why? like, why do we have a reason to cheer for her? But ever since she turned heel, like shortly before the pandemic started, and she used that time to get the ball rolling and improve on herself. She developed her gimmick of the dentist. She expanded on what that was. She used her real life profession, and especially her setting, to explain who she was, who the DMD was. And she also gradually improved on the mic, in the ring, and her charisma got so much better as the year went on. And this was captivated by two things: the unsanctioned lights out match versus Thunder Rosa at the St. Patrick's Day Slam. I think it was like, what are we, 3 months in? It was brutal, but you saw two hot women brutalize and beat each other and bloody each other in the main event. Something I've never seen before in women's wrestling. Blood and, hot women going, oh shit. So they beat each other up to a pulp. Like, I've never seen that before in women's wrestling. And, the visual of a bloody Britt Baker, it's a good visual. It's a good visual. So it was also captivated, while in storyline it didn't make much sense, but I guess it's a good capper anyway. Her year of reinvention was capped off by winning the women's championship finally from Hikaru Shida at Double or Nothing. So Britt Baker honestly had the best year out of anyone in AEW. And honestly, it was the best thing going for them in AEW. That's not, it's not Kenny Omega. It's not the Cuxa suck. It's Britt Baker. It was Britt Baker during this pandemic era. And last but not least, who can forget Shaquille O'Neal? Shaquille O'Neal, can you dig it? Having his match on the Go Home show for Revolution. And honestly, I'm kind of sad that they didn't have this match at Revolution for Shaquille O'Neal. But obviously, it was later found out that the All-Star game was going to be the same night as AEW Revolution. So that hurt things. But Shaq did pretty well in this match, especially for a guy that, hasn't done anything like too physical in the last couple of years. But he was the big highlight reel of this match. And that table spot was still pretty funny. And him sleeping, that became a meme for a little while. So overall, a lot, this pandemic era of WWE, AEW, and wrestling in general, I mean, it wasn't great. It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. But, there were some good things. There were some good things to come out of it. Like the ones I mentioned. Britt Baker, Roman Reigns, the Shaq match. There were at least some good things. Obviously, I don't want to be too overly negative, because there were some positive things that came out of this pandemic era. But the thing was, there's just so much overwhelmingly bad. Like I said before, at the start of this episode, the pandemic era of pro wrestling, it exposed the fact that nobody cares about wrestling like they once did back in the Attitude Era, even so far back as the Ruthless Aggression Era, and even so far back as the PG Era. Nobody cares about pro wrestling. This is why, with the goofy storylines that you see on Raw, the Matt Riddle riding around in a scooter, or the Russell Wilson, Pete Careless, Seattle Seahawks, Charlotte Flair and Rhea Ripley, you see them on Raw, or the questionable booking with Drew McIntyre. What is he doing? I guess WWE is not making both smarks and casuals happy. No, it's no wonder they're continually going down the path of sinking viewership. But it also doesn't help AEW too, because they're not appealing to casuals either. They're not giving us a reason as to why should we care about Malachi Black, or why should we care about Chris Statlander? Why should we care about Orange Cassidy? Or why should we care about Kenny Omega? Why should we care about Hangman Adam Page or Brian Cage or whatnot? Neither company is given a reason to care, especially for the casual viewer, because the casual viewer is the key to making any show, any TV show succeed. Because the less casual viewers you have, the less people will care. The less viewers you'll get, and the less viewers you get, the more likely you'll eventually get your show canceled. So overall, for as happy I am that the COVID era wrestling is over, I guess I'm glad to look back on it a little bit, but just remember that this era of wrestling will be best remembered as how wrestling was exposed as, well, people not giving a shit about it as they once did. But that is pretty much it for this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. What was your favorite moment from the pandemic era of pro wrestling, whether it's in WWE or AEW? If you even have a favorite moment. I know, like, for a lot of people, they stopped watching wrestling entirely. I guess this was they've either been stopped watching it, or this was like their boiling point, and it's like, I had enough. And what was your least favorite moment? What was your worst moment? Let me know. Send me a message on Twitter or Instagram, or if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment. Let me know how you feel. Let me know your opinions on this subject matter. But that is it for this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. I'm your host, DylanLasagna. Make sure to listen to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor FM. Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna. And as always, keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of wrestling and sports in general. At least fans come back for WWE next week, and the pandemic era of pro wrestling will officially be over with by then. So, again, keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on wrestling and sports in general. Cold as heck. And until then, until next time, peace out.